Welcome to episode 290 of Real Health Radio. You can find the show notes and the links talked about as part of this episode at 7, so the word all spelled out, SEVEN health.com/290. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Real Health Radio. I'm your host, Chris Sandel. I'm a nutritionist and a coach, and I help clients to fully recover. Now, before I get started with today's episode, I have an announcement to make, and I'm currently hosting a free 3-part live training series. It's called How to Fully Recover from an Eating Disorder. And I'm recording this in advance, but from when this episode airs, the first training will have been last Thursday, so on Thursday the 8th. And there are 2 more trainings this week on Tuesday, so tomorrow, and then Thursday. And this isn't the same training that I'm doing on each day, but it's a training series. And if you missed the first training, that is fine. You can still sign up, and there is a replay of that original training that you can watch, and then you can join for the other trainings live. I did a similar training back in September time of last year, and the feedback was really incredible. And I wanted to share a couple of snippets of emails that I received from last time. So one said, I've had an eating disorder for almost 3 decades at this point, and I found your information more helpful than an entire treatment stay. Another one, thank you so much for caring enough to offer your time and energy to helping others. Another, I wanted to thank you for providing this very, very helpful information and sharing your approach to reaching full recovery. I'd like you to know that I would have paid for this training. That's how valuable it was to me. And then the final one, I want to thank you for taking this time to create these 3 trainings. They're probably the most helpful 5.5 hours I've ever had in recovery, and I've been at this nearly 3 decades. After many inpatient, residential, PHP, and IOP stays, this is invaluable information that is tangible, doable, and understandable. I've never met someone who has such an insight into eating disorders that hasn't had one themselves. Thank you again. I really appreciate you. So the trainings really landed with people, and from the comments, you can hear how valuable and practical it was. So if you would like to register to be part of it, you can go to the show notes. So 7-health.com/288, and there you can click to register. So now on to today's show. So this week on the show, I am interviewing Jayne Cudia. So Jayne is actually a past client of mine, and I'm interviewing her about her recovery and her experience with working together. And so I first started working with Jayne back in July of 2021. And for about 18 months, we were doing consults every 2 weeks. So we were pretty intense in terms of our working together, and there was back and forth correspondence during this time. And then after those 18 months, Jayne was in a fairly solid place with her recovery. So we then transitioned to doing more of a maintenance package or maintenance phase with it, where we would have consults every 2 months, and then we could do correspondence between calls. And we kept this up for the last year and had our final consult in December time. So we worked together for a period of 2.5 years. And over this time, Jayne has completely changed her relationship with food and exercise and her thoughts about weight and her body, and she's gone from being in the depths of an eating disorder to making a full recovery. As part of this episode, we talk about how her eating disorder began, her originally believing that she'd be able to start making changes on her own, but then realizing that she couldn't. The pivotal point, roughly 9 months into her recovery, that really made all of the difference. Her extreme hunger and her then giving herself permission to eat, taking time off exercise and reintroducing it, studying as a dietitian while in recovery, and so much more. It's incredible what Jayne has accomplished over these last 2.5 years. It was not easy by any stretch, and she's such a great example of what is possible in recovery. Because I truly believe that what Jayne achieved is possible for everyone. We don't talk about it in this interview, but Jayne is going to be part of the Fundamentals of Full Recovery program that I run. I'm not actually going to say too much about it here, as she's involved in something that is completely new to the program. That's coming when I relaunch it shortly. So if you are part of the program, you'll be hearing more from Jayne and seeing more of Jayne. And if you want to be part of the program, you can go to the show notes at 7-health.com/290. You can sign up to go on the waitlist. Obviously, while you're there, you can also sign up for the live 3-part training series that I'm currently doing. Anyway, let's get on with the interview. Here is my conversation with Jayne Cudia. Hey, Jayne, thanks for joining me today and doing this interview with me.
Hi, Chris. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and share a little bit about my story and about working with you.
Nice. So I guess just as a starting place, talk about your eating disorder and when it started.
So I think on the surface, my eating disorder started as a result of the beginning of the pandemic. So in March 2020, I had just got my junior year of college cut short. I went home to my parents' house and I was very bored. And I used that time to go on a diet and lose those 5 pounds that I thought were holding me back, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I really think that was probably a result of the anxiety about what was going on in the world and just really wanting to have some sort of control.
Yeah. And prior to that happening, what had been your relationship? What did your relationship with food be like?
So I remember when we first met, I was like, oh, yeah, before that one diet that turns into an eating disorder, I had no problem with food at all before. That's what it felt like at that time. It felt like it was my first diet, and I guess it kind of was. But I think there were some kind of warning signs that I just didn't catch, but that led up to this point in time. So I think the pandemic was like a catalyst for the development of an eating disorder for me. But there were other things, like when I was 9 years old and playing with a friend, and we would go on her parents' like exercise equipment, like why did we want to do that? Or when I was like 13, drinking this psyllium husk, like fiber out of my parents' cabinet and not eating anything that day. Like there were warning signs.
Yeah.
I think I didn't maybe take things to heart too much. So I, maybe did these like behaviors, but then the next day I would just be fine. I never really had a super negative body image, thankfully. And I guess my weight was always pretty consistent over time. But, I received all the messages that everyone does from society and stuff. So I think, yeah, it all just came to a head during that time.
Yeah. And so you said it started as part of the pandemic. How long did it take before you recognized that this is now a problem and I want to recover?
So it really didn't take me long to realize I had a problem, but it did take me longer to realize I wanted to actually like do something about it and recover. So I was looking through some of my journals. I kept a journal. I have like 7 journals filled all through this time, which is amazing. So I said it started in March 2020 when the pandemic hit. And then in May 27th, 2020, I wrote in my diary, I've been kind of obsessing over the whole calorie thing. I don't want to create an eating disorder, of course. I just also don't want to throw away all my hard work by going back to eating bad/high cal foods. And then I said what the scale had read that day and whatever. So that was 2 months in.
Yeah.
And I knew I had a problem, but I didn't see how. I just didn't want to stop, I guess.
Yeah. And when you say I knew I had a problem, what indicated that it was a problem? Like your inability to do something different, or was it something else that was telling you it was a problem?
I think I was obsessed with the food and the calories. I couldn't like lighten up at all. I couldn't get out of it. It was like satisfying to be, I guess to see my weight loss. And I just was like, well, there's no way I could gain weight again. Like I guess just like enthralled with what I was doing. And I didn't necessarily want to keep living that way, but I was just petrified of gaining the weight back that I had lost. And meanwhile, this was like 5 to 10 pounds. It wasn't really anything too much, but that was super important to me to keep kind of going. And then, the goal weight always dropped. I wanted to be this weight, then 5 pounds lower, then 5 pounds lower. Another added layer was I was going back to college, and I had a lot of emotions about that. I knew I was going to be drinking with my friends more and eating different foods that I wasn't eating when I was at home with my parents. So I had kind of justified what I was doing by saying, oh, well, when I go back to college, I'm going to be eating more. I'll probably gain 5 pounds, 10 pounds back. So let me just use this time to lose as much as I can now. And then if I gain a few, whatever, it'll be no big deal. Obviously, I got back to college and it was a huge problem for me. It didn't go away. I knew I had a problem, and then I kind of wanted to recover. Like, I didn't want to be thinking about food all the time. I didn't want to have all the symptoms that I had, which I'll go into in a second. But I also just didn't have it in me to intentionally gain weight. Like, that was something I was not willing to do at that time.
Tell us about the symptoms. What symptoms were going on? Obviously, you've mentioned the obsessiveness and the fear that was there, but what else was going on? Both physical symptoms, but then also mental, emotional symptoms.
I mean, mental, emotional, like I had no energy. I mean, I was exhausted all day. And part of that was because I was not eating enough. I had no energy. Another part was just because of how I was operating. Like, I had that brain that was like, wake up at 6 o'clock a.m. and go to the gym, come home, study, do this, do that. Like, I had no time to rest. I was exhausted. My friendships suffered. I was still like with my same group of friends and stuff, but I wasn't putting my energy into it. I couldn't maintain relationships with like partners and stuff either. And then physically, I was freezing cold. I remember it was like 60 degrees Fahrenheit one night, and I was out with my friends, and everyone was in like crop tops and tank tops, and I was in like a winter coat. And like, I thought it was funny. Somehow it was like satisfying to have some of these symptoms, because I was like, wow, okay, like I did it. I achieved it, which is so twisted to think. But my hair was super thin. I had a lot of hormonal acne, which I was super insecure about. I would sweat profusely in my sleep. I would wake up to urinate multiple times in the night and then not be able to go back to sleep. I was just obsessed with my physical appearance and how I was being perceived by others. Obviously, I was extremely hungry every single minute of the day, which was super distracting and very uncomfortable. I exercised obsessively. Like, I didn't think I had a problem with exercise, but I did, obviously. Like, I had to go to the gym 5 to 6 days a week. If I didn't, it was like earth shattering. I remember one time, it's like all coming back to me. I was in my college apartment, and for some reason, I think the gym was closed, or for some reason, I couldn't go to the gym. And I put on like my work, and my bedroom was tiny. And I put on my workout gear, and I was like doing ab workout on like carpet floor of my bedroom. And I was being quiet. I don't think I wanted to like wake up my roommates. It was very odd, but I was obsessed with exercise.
Yeah.
I was miserable. I lost my period. I was super constipated all the time. All the things, pretty much.
Yeah. What did it feel like to then get in contact with me and make that decision towards, okay, I do want to start recovering? What tips it in that direction? Was there an event, or just talk about making the decision to start recovery?
So when I was in college, I received a message from my university's like psychological health services. Pretty much somebody can report you saying, I'm concerned about this individual. Can you go check on them? And then you get a phone call from like a counselor. I got one, and I felt a lot of emotions. I felt like, oh my God, I can't believe it got to this point where like people are recognizing I have a problem. But also I was like still in that mindset of, wow, really, I must be really skinny. People are concerned that I'm too skinny. Like, oh my God. But that was the eating disorder brain. And the, true self realized like, okay, this is a problem. I didn't mean for it to go this far. So I was seeing a counselor for like a few sessions. I didn't get so much out of it. I actually met with a nutritionist like twice, I think, and we just weren't a good fit. I just didn't feel like she really understood the gravity of what I was going through. and I was finishing up my final year of college. I think I was unable to really make changes because I was petrified of the circle that I surrounded myself with seeing me gain weight. So I was like, let me just wait a few months till I graduate and I'm back home with my parents, and then I will actually fix this. So I was listening to your podcast. I remember like being on the treadmill at the gym and like running and listening to your podcast. And it's just funny because it's like, I don't know, like the opposite of the message that you're trying to give. But I couldn't allow myself to take any action, even though I was preparing myself, I guess, mentally, like understanding I have a problem, understanding a little bit of the science behind it. But like that wasn't enough. I couldn't make any changes on my own.
Yeah.
So then once I got back, it was the summertime and I was like, all right, he's pretty much speaking to me on his podcast. Like I am the client. So I just reached out and, it worked out.
Yeah. What made me stand out from other coaches or nutritionists? Like why did you reach out to me? What was it in the podcast that resonated so much?
I think it was just how, I guess, much information, like I felt like you were, if anybody could help me through this, it would be you, because I just felt like you were super insightful. You actually stuck to like the facts, and I really like the science behind things. So you walk through that in a way that is easy to understand, especially people with like anorexia or certain eating disorders are very like the details and understanding the science behind things is very important to them. So I think that made me feel comfortable, like, okay, I can trust him. He knows exactly what I'm going through and he knows how to fix it. So I think that's why, it worked. And when we met once, I was like, all right, I'm sold. Like, let's keep meeting. Let's do it. But I mean, I was still very nervous at that point of gaining weight. So like, I wanted to recover, but I didn't want to gain weight. And obviously I found out that is not possible.
Yeah.
But it did take me a minute to get there.
How did it feel when you found out that bit of information?
I think I was like devastated. I was like, wait, I can't just start eating normally and just like be normal about this and like just stay where I'm at, but start eating normally. Yeah, I think it was like a realization that, wow, diet culture and whoever sets you up for this doesn't tell you the way out, like at all. They're like, oh, diets fail, people gain weight. It's like, well, what else are they supposed to do? Having an eating disorder forever is literally the only option. But I mean, it was a hard pill to swallow. But then ultimately, I just, based on the work we did, the conversations we had and everything, I was like, well, okay, I'd rather gain weight and be done with this.
And so then describe a little from your perspective what our work together looked like.
So at first, the biggest thing was to get me eating more because I was just like not in a good place, like metabolically and anything like that. So I remember I got labs done and sent them to you to make sure I was like, okay. I think the first goal we had was like, okay, eat breakfast within 1 hour of waking up, because I was ravenously hungry when I woke up in the morning, but for some reason, like needed to wait like 3 hours. I don't know. So I remember we did that. We just like bulked up the food that I was eating. So I felt like comfortable about it. And it was probably still like almonds on my salad. Like it wasn't really, truly letting loose, but it was like something to get actually more energy in. And then once I got there, I think it was more of like processing stuff and like identity, values. I loved that, what we did, like figuring out, okay, who do you want to be without the eating disorder? Like, what do you want to like stand for? Do you want the most important thing in your life to be what you look like? Or do you want to care about other things? Like, it's okay if you don't right now, because right now your biggest value is being skinny. But like, do you want that to be the rest of your life?
Yeah.
I think that was like super important. And then also just, like identifying my own fat phobia and like, why am I petrified to gain weight? Like, why? What's the root issue there? And then just finally, after months of like kind of recovering, whatever, being at a stable place, but like still being, baseline kind of hungry and like not fully there yet, And then just being like, all right, I'm so done with this. This is just like too prolonged for me. I'm just going to eat everything I need. And like it was a lot.
Yeah, I do remember that there was, if I'm thinking about it in phases, there was this first phase where, yes, you were making changes, but it was all pretty conservative and there was still a lot of quote unquote healthy eating as part of it. And then you kind of reached a tipping point. I kind of actually remember the actual session where it was just there was this realization of like, okay, what I've been doing, yes, it started a little bit of momentum, but no, I'm not going to fully recover if I keep doing this. And am I remembering correctly? Was it the fuck it diet? Did you read that and that
Yeah.
had a pretty big impact on you?
Yes, I read it like twice. The first time I read it, I understood it, but I didn't really take it to heart so much. The second time I read it was probably like 9 months later. And by that point, I had done a lot of work, but I still was just not really ready to go, I guess, like all in, as she says in the book. But I don't know. The last shoe dropped, whatever. And then I just was like, I'm going to do it. And I literally would eat like 6 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches as like a snack and then move on, and just sitting with the feeling of like, okay, I did that and that's fine. And I'm going to eat something again in another hour because I'm going to be hungry again. Like I had extreme hunger and I just finally let myself eat and gain weight and had to buy bigger clothes and had to go about my day. And people didn't comment on it. The earth literally was still moving. It was not a big deal to other people. And then I just showed myself like, okay, nobody cares. You're fine in this bigger body. Like you're still okay. I had to work on obviously body image stuff and whatever, and just adjusting to the big change, because I think for the first about 9 months that we worked together, I gained a decent, I don't know, of whatever, some weight, but I still had felt like comfortable with where I was and I didn't want to gain anymore. And then after, when I went on this fuck it approach, all bets were off and I started gaining way more weight. And yeah, it was uncomfortable, but it was what I had to do to get where I am now. So
Yeah, and it is that period where you started eating more, you gained more weight. But the thing I always want to get across to people is it's not gaining weight in a vacuum. It's you're doing that so that from a physical standpoint, a lot of healing can take place, but also from a mental standpoint. Like that's how so much of the rewiring of the brain starts to change. And that's how your perspective change, your outlook change. You discover that you are more resilient than you were feeling before doing all of this. And so I think it's really important for people to understand it's not just like, oh, I'm gaining weight. It's like there's all of these things that happen alongside it that are so beneficial.
yes, exactly. And it's the psychological piece of like, while you're gaining weight, are you like, oh no, I'm so scared, this is bad, whatever. That's not working. Or if you're like, I'm fully accepting, this is my situation, this is my body, it's going to change. Let me listen to my hunger and feed myself as much as I need. Okay, no problem. Now I'm going to have lunch. Like, that was the approach I was taking.
Yeah.
It was hard, but I had did a lot of work before that. So I was able to really kind of like detach and just be like, be ready for that. But yeah, exactly. You can't just like eat a lot and be like, all right, perfect. My eating disorder will go away. It has to go alongside like what you were saying,
Yeah.
kind of everything else.
Do you remember how long that extreme hunger lasted for in your case?
So I guess if I'm not going to count the first 9 months that we had met because I was in that like pseudo phase. But
Yeah.
then once I decided like enough is enough, I started eating, and probably around like I would say 5 months ish. Yeah. And then it was gradual. Like it wasn't like one day I woke up and I was like, okay, I want a lot less today. Like it was just, I got full quicker.
Yeah.
And yeah. And I stopped like craving peanut butter. I was good on that for a little. Like I still eat it like every day now, but I took a bit of a break because I didn't
Yeah.
want it. And just like it was very gradual. And then now looking back, I'm like, I don't know when it finally stopped. It wasn't like, finally.
Yeah.
Now it's done. It was just like, I just stopped thinking about it.
Yeah. One of the things that I get asked most by people who are in the early stages and are really struggling with all the thoughts that come up is like, how do you actually make a change? And so what was the process, or what did you do to get yourself to change and to make the changes that you needed to make as part of recovery?
I think first, eating anything that's out of your comfort zone, like it can be one extra almond if that's what's out of your comfort zone. It's like pushing yourself the smallest bit that is still, I guess, doable for you at that time. And that's first. Like, I think the eating has to happen at whatever rate, but in some capacity for you to then like start understanding and putting other things that you learn into practice. Yeah, I would say that. And then also like you're going to be very uncomfortable. Like with exercise, I remember a big thing with me was being uncomfortable not exercising. And like that was earth shattering. And I also couldn't understand how you could be healthy and not exercise. But like obviously getting rid of the eating disorder was the healthiest thing I could do for myself. But I didn't understand. Like I was like, Chris just wants me to be unhealthy. He's out to get me. But just, I guess, putting my trust into you, into the process, into my body, like, I guess that is my recommendation. Like, sometimes doing less is doing more, especially in recovery. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. And just trusting and just resisting the urge that you have, whether, it's to restrict, it's to exercise, it's to look at the scale, whatever, like, just relax, learn some other coping skills, do those, and take it one day at a time, I guess.
Yeah, nice. I will just add on the comment you made of like, if you could just have one almond, have one almond. I'm reluctant to get behind that just because I think what happens when people make those tiny incremental changes with food, it can feel like I'm putting in all of this effort and you're not actually going to get much upside from that, an extra almond or an extra apple or whatever. And so what can happen is that you feel like I've been trying this thing for months and months and nothing, it's not getting me anywhere. And so
Mm.
I'm all in favor of people need to go at a pace that is right for them. And in terms of changes with food, if it's too small, you're actually losing ground because of that and the extra anxiety that's going on. And like if I'm thinking about you, like obviously we had to go at the pace that was right for you, but those first 9 months could have been drastically shortened if you'd made some bigger changes to start with. And that's not me shaming you or anything along those lines. It's just like the reality of I think recovery takes so long for so many people, not because it has to take that long, just
Mm.
more because of the changes that they are willing to make in those moments mean that it gets prolonged.
Yeah, that is a really good point. That's true. Like I think in my case, I'm thinking about it and I'm like, okay, well, I look at what I went through and I'm like, wow, that was actually really quick. Like in the grand scheme of things, it was a few, but you're absolutely right. Like it didn't need to take me 9 months to say, okay, I'm ready to get rid of this. Like now let me actually do what I've been avoiding. So yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like I think it could even be more expedited, but at the same time, the goal for I think so many people is like, all right, how fast can I get done with this and put it behind me? And it's like, you can't have that sort of mindset. It's like, let me just do everything super quick and have no eating disorder again next month. Like it is going to take time,
Yep.
So it's that balance there for sure.
Yeah. And in terms of the exercise piece, and I know you talked about how much of a challenge that was. I'm trying to remember what happened in terms of your exercise while we were together. Was it a gradual thing that you reduced? Did you go cold turkey? What happened?
I think I went cold turkey. Like, I think you were like, I remember the conversation we had. I was like annoyed. I was pretty like bothered. I was like, yeah, I thought you were out to get me. You were like, Jayne, you really should not exercise at this point. Like, I think you were just like, it's not going to help you. You were just being real. It's not going to help you. You're doing it for the wrong reasons. It was all for aesthetics for me. The way I was exercising primarily was going to the gym and wearing tight clothing, looking at myself in the mirror. Like, that's the reason I was doing it. So you were like, that's just the eating disorder. So you shouldn't do that. And I was like, okay, like I really want to. And I'm so annoyed that you say I shouldn't, but let's see what happens. Yeah. So I didn't exercise for a long time. And then when I did, I think it was kind of when I was going in that like fuck it approach. So about 9 months in, I started doing hot yoga, like very intermittently. And I really liked it. And it was great. It's very important that it was something I hadn't done before. So it was a new experience for me. But then I was also training for a half marathon, which I remember you were very weary about because I was at such a critical point.
Yeah.
For me, it was I was doing it with some friends who I had just met in grad school. They didn't really know what I was going through. And I was trying to put up this like, I'm fine. I don't have an eating disorder front. So yeah. And I ended up doing it and it was fine. But I remember even during that process, I was like, oh, Chris, I'm only running 3 times a week. And you were like, so skip next week. Just show yourself you can skip next week. And I was like, oh God, okay. That's a little uncomfortable, but I did. And that was super important too, was like not being rigid. But I think that was honestly looking back, I think that was like a bit soon for me to start training for something.
Yeah.
So I probably wouldn't like recommend that.
Just to clarify though, by the time that started, you were a fair way along in your recovery. This was not in the early stages. It was at a point where you were much more in sort of a maintenance phase with your recovery. But yeah, I remember that conversation as well. And me just saying, look, you have to keep proving to yourself that you were the one in the driver's seat. Yeah, if you want to do the half marathon, fine. Like I can't stop you doing this, but you need to keep proving to yourself that you can take time off. So take this week off, and then next week go for 1 run or 2 runs. The week after that, take another week off. And I know you did reduce your training a lot based on those recommendations. And then once the marathon was over, I don't know if you went back to running or you done. And so at least it was a good thing to really show you were actually in the driver's seat at that stage.
Exactly. And that is a key point is like I did the half marathon. I wanted to do it with my friends. And then it was done. And I was like, perfect. I'm done with running. Like I have no desire to do it again. As opposed to if I kept it up and it was kind of like, okay, where is that coming from? Could be a potential red flag. But yeah, for me, I think it was fine. And you're right. I was way further along. So I did like the hot yoga and stuff. And then that wasn't super consistent. And then maybe towards the end of that 5-ish month period of having that extreme hunger and stuff and really being in that maintenance phase is when I had picked that up. But still, I mean, not necessarily like recommending that for other people. Everyone's journey with exercise and stuff is going to be different. So
yeah. And I would also add that since then, like your relationship with exercise has been very relaxed. It's been very much about what sounds like fun. I mean, you can talk a little more about this.
Yeah. So I also got into a new relationship during all of this, which added another fun layer. I mean, my partner is very supportive and I think he had helped me during this, definitely. But anyway, he had introduced me to snowboarding. I took up snowboarding with him in the winter and like that's exercise. But to me, it's not like I don't think of it that way. I also started rollerblading, but like very infrequently and consistently. I'm not like I have to rollerblade every week. I'm like, okay, I learned how to do it. It's fun. I haven't done it since like the summer because there's no point for me in the cold. But exercise is very, very chill for me even now. And that's really nice. It's a really good feeling.
Nice. And what about the eating disorder thoughts or the uncomfortable emotions or sensations? How did you deal with these throughout the process?
I guess the biggest thing would be finding coping mechanisms that are healthy. So not restricting, leaning on new things. Like I started journaling more. I really got in touch with my spirituality, but I did take that a bit and become a little rigid with it in the beginning, actually. So I remember like I have to meditate every day. And like that became a little weird. Like you're okay if you don't. So I had to find a balance there. But that did help me though. Like when I could use it as a tool, when I wasn't feeling well or when first thing in the morning to start my day, like there were benefits and that was helpful for me. But yeah, also just like talking to my sister, to my supportive partner, like doing things like that. And just also like learning how to sit with uncomfortable emotions. So, I could journal, I could listen to a podcast, go for a walk, and still not feel good. And that's okay. And like tomorrow is a new day, and maybe I'll feel better tomorrow. Maybe I won't. But then there'll be another day after that. And like just being at peace with emotions. And like I know I had you recommended some helpful like books on that and stuff. And that really helped. And that was something that I think I didn't have any awareness of before the eating disorder or before recovery. Like I had no sense of it's okay to be unhappy. Like I was the firm believer that like you have to be happy all the time. And like there was work to be done there too. But yeah, I think just sitting with the uncomfortable emotions and also using resources that I now had in my toolbox, like journaling, meditating, those things.
Nice. One of the other things that happened while working together and also during your recovery was that you started being a dietitian or started studying as a dietitian. So talk a bit about this.
Yes. So knew this was coming. So right after our first session, probably, I was like, okay, Chris is so smart. He is helping me. Like, this is amazing work he's doing. I'm so impressed. Like, I also had just graduated with a biology degree and didn't really know what I was doing with that. So it was kind of like the perfect, I guess, timing in my life to be like, wow, okay, I just want to be a nutritionist and help people with eating disorders. And like, that's great. And it came from a great place, heartfelt. But I was also currently living with an active eating disorder. So it's like there was no separation in timeline. If it wasn't like I was looking back and I was like, okay, that was a great experience. Now I want to do that too. I was in it. But I also didn't want to wait because I really had nothing going for me at that time. So it was like, now's the time in terms of my schooling and before I got a career and everything. So it was interesting timing. And I remember talking to you and it was like right after we had just met and I clearly had a raging eating disorder going on. And you were like, are you sure? Like, I don't know. A lot of people with eating disorders get it on food and stuff and like careers in food and whatever. So are you sure? But also obviously, you weren't going to like say you can't do this, So I appreciated the support that you did give me. And then I still have the eating disorder. So it was a bit interesting, but I will say my program was very, very, very weight inclusive, health at every size. Like I was very fortunate to be in a program that was so progressive in their, nutrition and dietetics that it didn't feel like I really learned about weight loss at all. And that is like remarkable. And especially the friends that I met and just, it was best case scenario for me.
Yeah.
I think it could have went wrong for sure if it had been a different style of dietetics. So I really lucked out. And it was a lot though. When I was recovering, I was like in nutrition class all day and then to come home and struggle with eating. And like, it was a lot of food and stuff. And at points I was like sick of it, but I mean, it all worked out very well for me now, but
yeah,
it was a messy situation, I think, like at points.
Yeah. I'm glad that you got into the program that you did. And I think like I've referenced you sort of anonymously at various points on the podcast when talking to other guests about different things that you had come up in your program. And when I'm sort of thinking about, okay, where is dietetics heading? And is it heading in a good direction or a not so good direction? Like thinking about your program would always make me feel really positive about the situation. And I remember you sharing different things with me from it about different people who'd come in to talk. And I think even some of the people who've had on my podcast came in and chatted as part of your course. So it was a really positive thing that you got to go to that type of a program, because that is definitely not the norm.
Exactly. It's definitely not the norm. And, the profession itself, unfortunately, there's a lot of eating disorders in the profession because that's, talking about all this stuff and so people gravitate towards that.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate to be in that program and to be surrounded by people who, for the most part, or at least my close circle, had a seemingly positive relationship with food and their bodies and stuff. So that was best case scenario for me, but it was definitely a risk because it could have went a not so great way. But thankfully it went well. And it actually at points that like even supported what I was talking about with you and like my recovery. So
Yeah, it was good. It was really good. And in terms of your relationship with your body, so it sounded like before the eating disorder started, it was fairly good or normal or neutral. It obviously went haywire as part of getting the eating disorder. And so where are you at now?
So I would say I'm back to where I was before, but probably even a bit better. I think before I was extremely neutral. Like I was just, I guess, typical or whatever you want to call it. Like food didn't dominate my thoughts. I had fine body image. I wasn't devastated by how I looked in the mirror. Like I was neutral. And yeah, now, I mean, I just don't think about it. And I guess if I do, like have a glimpse of myself or whatever it is, it's definitely not negative. So it's funny because usually what happens for some people, what happened for me was that I started at a weight that was comfortable for my body. And then I had lost weight, gained weight, and now I'm somewhere a bit, I guess, higher than where I had started this whole thing. And that's because, my body now feels more comfortable up here and it's not much of a difference. But either way, I feel like my confidence and my body image and everything is way better than it had ever been, even though now I'm at a weight where if you would have told me during my eating disorder I would be at this weight, I would be like crying and be like, no way, I can't do it. So it is interesting because body image really is psychological and it's not about what you actually look like or what your actual weight is. So it's cool to be in this place. But yeah, on a day-to-day basis, I'm not like concerned. It just doesn't even really cross my mind, honestly.
Nice. It's yeah, awesome that you are back in that place. And as you say, even better than you were before. How long did it feel like it took to get to that place? Did it feel like body image was one of the latter things to improve?
I think it coincided with when I kind of went all in with eating because I really approached that from a place of like, it doesn't matter what I look like. Like, I will do anything to get rid of this eating disorder. I don't care how much how much weight I gain. So I think it coincided with that almost, but it was gradual, like everything in this process. It wasn't like I woke up one day with amazing body image.
Yeah. And so with the process and what you went through, was it what you expected or was it different in some way?
I mean, I really didn't know what to expect. At that point, I was so in it so much, like it consumed my entire life that I hoped that I could just not be consumed by it. Like I guess I couldn't even imagine that I would get to this place where like it's like none of this ever happened. I feel like so many people talk about how people have eating disorders for life and like it's hard to change your brain and go back, but it's definitely possible. Clearly, it happened to me like pretty quickly in the grand scheme of like life. So I guess I had no idea I would be in this place. I just hoped I would be a little bit better than where I was.
Yeah. In terms of things that you wish you had known back when you were in recovery, is there anything that if you could tell your eating disorder self, okay, I want to share this with you, what would be that thing?
I think it would be maybe what we talked about earlier, which is like just do it sooner. Like I didn't need to wait those months of like just trying to gain like I wasn't all in. Just like do it if you're committing to this. just go for it. The sooner you go for it, the sooner this ball kind of gets rolling. And like, I know it's scary, but like your life will go on, the world will still spin, and you'll see that like it doesn't matter as much as you think it is. How much you weigh, what you look like, it really doesn't. So, yeah, that's the advice I would give. Like, just go for it and you'll see. And there's more important things that you will want to like care about.
Yeah, I'm in full support of that. And I think the action taking piece is so much what I focus on. And I think so often people spend a long time, and a long time could be decades, in this stage of thinking about things, wanting more information, wanting to know how it's all going to end before I even get started, and all of this pre-contemplation. And with the hope of, if I think about this long enough, I can figure this out and then I'll feel super comfortable and then I'll get started. And that never happens. And it's through taking action that you start to notice the changes and the positive changes. It doesn't happen beforehand. And so, yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess just advice I would give to somebody who hasn't started recovery is like, please reach out to somebody. Like, I knew I couldn't do it by myself. There's literally no way you can tease things out and just eat normally and have no eating disorder. Like, you need support. And that's why people like Chris are here, you know? So yeah, definitely get help.
Yeah, nice. So is there anything we haven't gone through that you want to mention? I feel like we've covered a lot, but is there anything you wish I asked you that I haven't?
No, I think it's just great. Is there anything else that, you think I should share?
Mm, I just want to add, and I think because I'd said before, obviously that there was this 9 month period that could have been sped up. And so, yes, in an absolute ideal world, if we're scripting recovery, I would say that is true. And I also want to say that your recovery in the whole scheme of things was pretty quick. And that's
Mhm.
probably connected to the fact that, one, it hadn't been going on for that long in the whole scheme of things, but two, you were taking action. And even in that early 9 month period, you were still making changes. Your eating was still increasing, your movement was still decreasing. Like, you were making changes, and decent enough changes, to your energy balance and the energy debt, so that there were improvements that were occurring. And yes, you did need something more significant to come along and really get you to a place of full recovery. But why you were able to recover in the way that you did was because you were taking action and that you were making changes. And that is definitely one of the things that I remember about our work together, that yeah, there were sessions, there were tears, and there was, this is so hard and it's so difficult, and I wish it was a different way, and why do I have to do this, and all of those things. And yet you were still able to make changes. And I think that's a really important thing. It's kind of testament to why you've been able to recover.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think looking back, like it does show me, and it, probably shows everyone who's gone through this, that there is so much that you can do. Like, you can, just by taking action, you can change your brain. You can change the way you operate, get rid of this disease that you have. Like, I'm proud of it. And it's definitely
Yeah.
empowering, and shows me that like there's so much I can do.
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story. It's amazing.
Thank you so much, Chris.
So that was my interview with Jayne. I hope it was inspiring and helped you see and feel what is possible. As I said in the intro, I truly believe that full recovery is something that is possible for everyone. And I hope there was some good insights and some helpful bits that you took from this interview. As I mentioned right at the top, right now I'm doing a free 3-part live training series. To sign up, you can go to the show notes at 7-health.com/290, and you'll see the link there to register. So that is it for this episode. I will catch you again soon.